Here we go. This is going to be our first video in our segment about pivot tables. I will talk about basic pivot tables. So what I have here is I have list data. Essentially it's data set up in a linear fashion, right? Records, fields, list of information. So I like to think of when we're dealing with pivot tables, I like to think of asking myself questions that can't easily be answered by me just looking at this data. Let's imagine this is thousands upon thousands of records. And I asked you a simple question. I would like to know how much Jones sold in 2013 total. You would have to go take this record, find the invoice total, this record, find the invoice total, this record, find the invoice total, and add them all up. It's really a difficult thing to do, especially if we have a large amount of data. So what I would do is I would utilize a pivot table to take this linear data that's detailed and summarize it in a way that I pick. So when you're first creating pivot tables, it's a good idea to actually take your Excel list and change it into a table. Reason for that is if you add records, remove records, you don't have to go through the procedure of actually changing the range. You would just update and the table would pull in the new data. It still works as a list, okay? So it doesn't have to be a table. That's the way I like to set it up. So I'm just going to quickly convert this to a table by going to the Insert tab and choosing Table. And then on the Design tab, I'm just going to give it a name. I'm just going to call it Sales. Now, I want to create a pivot table based on this information. So that's also found under Insert. And then I'm going to choose Pivot Table. It says Select a Table Arrange. It's automatically picked up the Sales table because I was clicked into it, so that's perfect. And I will place the new pivot table on a new worksheet. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. So what I end up with is a really basic looking Excel spreadsheet where I have this little pivot table section, the rest just blank cells. And then over on the side it popped up my pivot table fields list. And here I have all the fields from that data list that we were looking at from before. And then I have 4 sections. Filters, which we're not too interested in right now. We have rows, row headings, column headings, and a value axis. So remember at the beginning of this discussion I said I would like to know how much Jones sold in 2013. Or let's just rephrase that question slightly. Let's say I want to know how much each salesperson sold for each year. In order to do this, all we'd have to do is add those fields to corresponding areas, either rows or columns or both, and then what value we want to summarize. This can be done by clicking and dragging. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take salesperson and drag that into the rows section. You'll notice my pivot table starts to get created here. It puts the 3 salespeople's names. Hasn't put every single detailed record for them, so it's not repeating a bunch of times. It has summarized it. Then I'm going to take the year. I'm going to drag that and put that into the column section. Now I'm getting the 2 years that I have the data for along the top. And where these line up in this blank area in here, I would like to add up the invoice. So I'm going to drag the invoice into the value section. You notice as soon as I do that, it defaults to sum of invoice. I'll go over how to change the summary later, but for us that was very convenient because that's what we wanted. So now that very simple question, how much did Jones sell in 2013, can be answered very effectively. I'd say 52,000. Whereas looking at this data list, not so easy to answer that question. We can utilize pivot tables to summarize complex data very, very quickly and efficiently using the pivot table feature in Excel.